Right, I think we'll start, everybody. Can everybody hear us online? Can everybody hear us?
Yes, loud and clear, thank you. Fine.
Lovely, fab. So we'll kick off, it's past past. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this Chorley Liaison meeting on Wednesday the 16th of October. My name is Councillor Kim Snape and I'm the Chair of Chorley Liaison, and Councillor Tommy Gray is the Vice Chair. Please just note that the meeting is being recorded and will be accessible on the Council's YouTube page. If you wish to speak at any stage, please indicate to me that you wish to do so. When invited to speak, please turn your microphone on and turn it off when you finish speaking. Please speak clearly and do not cover your mouth when speaking to make it easy for any lip readers to understand you as well. And can everyone ensure that the phones are turned to silent? We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms do sound, please exit the way that you came in and congregate in St Thomas's Square next to the police station, which I think everybody knows. Lovely, thank you. So, item 2, minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the last meeting are included in the agenda. Any comments, or are we okay to? Yep, no objections, fab. So, we'll approve the minutes, and then we've got item 3. So can I thank County Councillor Rea, the Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, for coming to talk to us about school place planning across the borough. And we've also got Abby Hardy and Paula Durant as well. That's correct, isn't it? So we have, I think, Democratic Services did ask for questions to be submitted before this evening, and we have received 4 questions. One from County Councillor Holgate that isn't on the subject that we're discussing. So if he does end up watching it, you're more than welcome to email Jane, and Jane will provide you, or the officers will provide you with an answer to that. But I think between the officers and Jane, they're going to do a bit of an introduction, and the answers to the questions will be in the sort of talk that they'll do, and then depending where we are time-wise, we'll look at some further questions and maybe some takeaway points for them as well, and I'm sure they'll come back to you if there's anything that can't be answered this evening. So I'll hand you over to Jane. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, everybody, and thank you for welcoming us here tonight. It's really helpful that you're able to provide some questions for us ahead of the meeting, so that's helped us to shape what we're going to talk about so that you get the right answers. So I don't want to keep you waiting any longer, so Abby's going to start. Abby's our Head of Education Improvement, and Paula is our School Place Planning Manager. So between the two of them, they'll be able to fill you in on everything you need. If there are any questions, or if you want to write to me about anything you need clarification after the meeting, then please feel free to do so. Okay, thank you.
They are in. Have you got the agenda, or I can read?
So. Yeah.
There you go. We're a bit fancier than these in County Hall. Thank you for having us this evening. Really appreciate it, and the opportunity to talk to you all about people place planning in Chorley. So basically, we've obviously got your questions, but just as a sense of kind of understanding what some of your concerns might be, and to kind of give you a bit of an overview of what preferences have looked like. So by preferences, what I mean is when you apply for a school place, you have your first, second and third preference. And basically they've been going up in Chorley over the last few years. So as a parent of a child who went to high school 3 years ago in Chorley, I know how difficult that can be and how it has been. But actually those preferences are improving year on year. So last year it was 94% that got their 3 preferences. This year it was 96. And basically next year and the year after, as I'm sure Paula can explain as well, the pupil forecasts suggest that the amount of children are coming down in Chorley. So actually this year we had 50 places that were spare in Chorley at Southlands High School. And we kind of expect that there still be that kind of room and space within Chorley over the next few years. As you might know as well, there is a fall in birth rate, so as that kind of moves through over the years as well, we would expect that to sort of come down with a bit of that pressure. So even though we might have house building, we've also got that birth rate sort of evening it out across Chorley as well. So I just wanted to kind of explain that bit as a little bit of an opening, but I'll go to your specific questions now, if that's okay. So our first question was around how can we make sure that we've got adequate provision in South Chorley for secondary school places, because I think, and it links into another question that someone else asked about kind of Rivington and Blackrod and Adlington sort of area, and obviously most of those children would apply to Albany High School because that's kind of where the nearest one would be. So Albany High School changed their admissions criteria last year to allow their children from their feeder primary schools, which actually sit in Bolton, to be prioritised on their admissions criteria. As they are an academy, they decide on their admissions criteria. We don't have a say in that admissions criteria. It is their choice to make that decision as an academy trust. And lots of academy trusts are doing that as well. So you might see that we've got an academy trust happening in Chorley at the moment. So we've got Parklands, Bolsher Lane, Gillibrand, etc. It's likely that their admissions criteria will have something similar around moving towards kind of allowing the children who attend their academy primaries preference over children who are local or kind of have all the criteria applied to them as well. So that happened last year, and basically we saw around 10 children go to Albany High School out of that sort of criteria basically. And when we did the numbers over the next few years, that does look a similar amount. So the children who sort of live on that border, who would expect would probably go to Albany, we can kind of see that that would probably impact on maybe around 10 children a year. But just to give you a bit of context around that as well, we did obviously write to governors at the time, and obviously we spoke to yourself, didn't we, last year about that. We did put in an official objection, so we did do what we can do as LCC to sort of ask not to do that, because we know there is a pressure on places in Chorley, but also that Albany actually did increase their places for us last year as well by 10, and actually this year coming it's another 15. So they have actually increased the number of places as well as the numbers that are sort of coming in order to adjust for that as well. So that was kind of what I was going to talk around those two. Is there anything that anybody had any questions about that particular one around South Chorley?
Just to follow what you're on, are you saying that...
Just put your microphone on, Alan. Sorry.
Are you saying that you've spoken to Albany?
Yeah.
And they've increased the number of places?
Yeah.
Which should account for the shortage of the things?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Terry?
Just a point of clarification, please. Since when did we move to feeder primary schools for academies?
So an academy trust can decide what admissions criteria they want to
Sorry,
use.
that's not the answer. They can decide.
Yeah.
But using the language that we used 40 years ago, there's no such thing, as far as I'm still aware, from the Secondary Heads Association point of view, of a feeder primary school anymore.
So it'll be the primary schools that are within their trust. So those are the ones that I mean when I mean that they feed into Albany.
Right, so that's a different point of view.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to raise a question, Lynn? Or? Just put your, have you got your microphone on? Sorry.
In our village of Coppell, the feeder school St Oswald's to Holy Cross did not take all of the children. There were not enough places.
Yeah. So it depends on the admissions criteria of each of those schools. And as you know, all of Chorley secondary schools are academies. So they decide on the criteria of their own admissions. They don't form part of the LCC admissions criteria.
But going back to what this gentleman says, if it's a feeder school, surely there should have been a place for every child at that school.
That's not how it works. So basically, for an academy trust, they can choose whichever primary school they want to that can go above them. So they can just name different primary schools. Those, so they've named the ones that are in their trust for that particular one for Albany.
Is he not
For
correct in
St-
saying then that it's not a feeder school? If they
Yeah,
can't
so
take every child?
the gentleman's correct over there. The feeder school terminology, I use that incorrectly. It's not an appropriate term.
Any other questions on that first question, or are we? Yeah, Alan.
It just makes the point that when academies were first introduced and made somewhat independent of the local authority, this was the concern that was expressed at the time. And it's now, all the secondary schools in Chorley are academies. And the local authority, sadly, regrettably, aren't able to sort of influence that other than by persuasive or whatever. And it's just it's a source of aggravation for parents and stuff like that, people like that. And I hope it does get addressed in the near future, hopefully by a change of government.
Julia.
Yeah, I was going to say, it is problematic. I mean, Lynn's touched on Coppell with the feeder school issue, but we've got more than 400 houses being built in Coppell alone right now. And whilst we've seen the drop in birth rate because some of the year groups at reception in two of the schools in Coppell are less than 10 this year, obviously because we're obviously building family houses, so there's going to be some requirement to focus in on really.
And I think it probably is where we need Paula to come in as our technical expert for people-based planning, so I'll hand over to Paula.
Yeah, so just to give a clarity on that is that we, obviously my team look at the sufficiency duty across Lancashire, and it's our duty to ensure that every child has a school place, a local school place. So we do monitor and we do have data, so we have two lots of data that we get, autumn and spring census data. So that's based on our birth rates and obviously the children that are in those areas. It also takes account of all the housing that has permission and consent. So we obviously have, from each district council, we will have a housing land supply update. So we're just doing that at the moment, and that will be going into our forecast data. So that projects all those houses that are actually with permission. So that already is counted into our data and our forecast projections. That said, obviously, you know, the projections are just that, they are forecasts, and we obviously do validate that in relation to our actual numbers on roll. So we do triangulate that, working closely with Debbie Ormerod in Pupil Access to make sure that, you know, we are clear. We do have regular meetings with the DFE to obviously talk about our spaces, and we do obviously do an annual, what we call a statutory return, so statutory capacity assessment profile that we have to return each year. And again, that will show what our capacity is in our schools, what we're doing in relation to managing and mitigating any shortfalls. But it's not ongoing. It's not just a, you know, whilst we have two lots of data a year and we scope for that, we have a programme that we obviously then will take from that and prioritise work accordingly. And we will, some areas, we know the housing's coming, but we have to obviously not oversupply. So we have to be really mindful of looking at the stability and not destabilising schools in those local communities. It doesn't always help that obviously we do have academy status, and again we also have that issue of, you know, we will work with those academies, we will work with those schools, and actually some academy trusts are very helpful and very supportive of working with us, whether that be to do an exceed or a bold year or maybe a temporary expansion. As we have said, numbers are dropping. There is a national fall in birth rates. There is also the element of the migration, which can be very varied. So even if we've got new housing coming forward, that doesn't always mean that we're going to put children in at reception. It could mean, and at the moment we have a number of issues around children having shortfalls at Key Stage 2. So how we manage that is very different. And again, that's about having transient population where people are moving about, and also people that might move into a new house might not have a reception age child. They might have a 7 or an 8-year-old. So again, it's us looking at that element. It's an ongoing piece of work. It's not an exact science. So it's not straightforward, but we do have processes in which to mitigate it.
Could I just ask another question?
Oh, Alan, could you speak about that? You sure?
It's just that obviously we've got localised housing, but all of a sudden the geography of the school places is extended to South Ribble, which is, you know, not really acceptable for local children in local areas. We don't really expect them to be making those big journeys across into the districts, and that's happened without any consultation at all.
Another aspect that we don't have control over is parental preference. We can plan for forecasting sufficiency of children. What we can't do is put too many places in, but there will always be parental preference where parents may choose to go into a different area.
So no,
it's just not the reason why we've got geography change.
No, so I was just going to explain that one. So there is 50 places spare in Chorley. So even though Chorley and South Ribble is sometimes clubbed together as one planning area, because that's how we do that sometimes. But actually, in terms of Chorley, there is 50 spare places, and there will be more spare places in Chorley. So in terms of our capacity and kind of what we've got in Chorley, that's where the spaces are. And we understand that parental preference might not be to go to Southlands because it doesn't have that good judgment yet. But it's past judgment that it had, you know, just recently they were re-inspected to just keep that requires improvement, suggested that there were, you know, lots of improvements going on there, and we would expect them to become good the next time they get inspected.
Alistair and then Lynn. Thank you.
I've got 3 questions. One you just sort of touched on, because Chorley and South Ribble has been treated as one area, whereas no other part of Lancashire has been treated as one area. So why are we different?
You're not. We have a number of planning areas where we have combined, so we look at things in isolation, but we will also look at them in the wider picture, because some areas will have a knock-on effect on other areas. But we also have to work closely with the DFE, who will guide us in relation. So we have to agree our pupil planning areas with the DFE as well.
So are the government making Lancashire treat Chorley and South Ribble as one area? Is that what you're saying? The DFE are doing that? Because the last table we saw, there was only Chorley and South Ribble shown as one planning area. Nobody else was. So if DFE are making you do that, that's fine. We'll take up the issue of the DFE. But if it's county doing that, then...
No, so can I pick that up, Councillor Bradley, just because as a resident of Bookshaw, and I sit right in the middle, obviously, between the two, and that is kind of one of the reasons why we need to use South Ribble places as well, because obviously, actually, Bolshaw's is a closer school to Bookshaw than St Michael's.
Depends which bit of Bookshaw you're in.
Depends which one you're in. But you know what I mean? So you kind of have to use where the local schools are for that particular area, and that's why sometimes it makes sense to kind of go a little bit over the area. But you're not, you know, we wouldn't send a child really far away in South Ribble. South Ribble's a big place, you know, but obviously we would kind of use that as kind of that local area to consider those places.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. And notwithstanding all the points about academies, and academies can do what they want, this is a wholly different political point, but we'll deal with that elsewhere. There is an issue about, obviously in South, most of the questions come from the South, because that's where the pinch points come, because Albany, where I didn't have a problem, now has a problem. Now Southlands has the spare capacity, but as you said, people don't want to go there because it's perceived to be the poorest performing school in Chorley, and there's a competition for the best students and etc. And it just manifests itself all the way through, doesn't it? But then you end up with this dislocation with families where they've got different kids in different schools, all running around between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, ferrying kids left, right and centre, adding to traffic gridlock and chaos and all the rest of it, disrupting people's lives. What is the plan to sort that out, to equalise up where the school places are to where the people are living? And I appreciate Chorley has had an expansion, but that was very well signposted, i.e. you live on Bookshaw, so you know that was signposted, a massive development like that. But also, in recent figures I've seen, Chorley still slated as one of the areas to grow most, as is South Ribble, and as is Southern Preston. So therefore, there is only going to be more pressure for school places in this area. And the 50 currently at Southlands, from what I understand, there are also pressures from some of those secondary schools to reduce spaces currently because they feel like they're not getting sufficient reward for keeping those spaces open. Is that also a function?
Recently spoken to Southlands about reducing their pan and told them that they can't, and they're not going to. So that was the agreement with that, and that is because we know that we need the places. Pardon?
Is that like an annual standoff, i.e. are you...
Not an annual standoff, they just suggested that that might be something that they could do, and we said no because our forecasts suggest that we would need the places moving forward. So
And is the pupil premium they get for keeping those spaces open sufficient not to build that pressure back up, is the question I suppose I'm asking as well.
So in terms of, I think the thing would be around the Southlands kind of gap for them is that the biggest thing that they need to do is improve their school, because then it makes them more competitive in that area, and then we have a really great performing school in every area. And ultimately, obviously, there's a lot that we can do and there's a lot we can't do in terms of that space of trying to do school improvement. But I mean, ultimately, that is kind of what we would rather do, rather than try and put expansions on some of our other schools, is actually work with that school that has the places to drive up improvement in that space, and then everyone can go to a really good school in their area.
And final point, and I'll ask it because Alan will probably ask it anyway, is, for an example, when you've got the Western Parishes, which has one secondary school in Croston, which is increasingly competing for kids because it's got very high standards and it wants to maintain its high standards, so it's competing. Unfortunately, the people that are driven out of that school are the primary kids in that area who aren't at the ability level of others, and then therefore they have to travel longer distances. They either travel back into Chorley or they go over the border into South Ribble. That is a problem for those families in that area.
So there shouldn't be any reason why those families don't get into that school. There shouldn't be anything to do with academic achievement or anything like that. They have to...
or attendance at church and everything else.
Yeah, but that's the same as the other schools that are around, aren't they? That they choose their own admissions criteria. So we have Bolshaws, for example, as a C of E school who does not have church attendance on their role, and so it is just dependent on the different schools and what they choose to do. And in Bishop Rawston in particular, even though they are slightly oversubscribed, they are only slightly oversubscribed. Actually, in comparison to some of our others in Chorley, they're actually going to have space in the next few years as well.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn?
So Julia touched on the fact that we've got 400 houses being built in the area, which is conservative because we know that developers are still moving in, and we've got Charnock Richard with housing. You say that you're going to wait and see what happens. Do you think?
No, we're not going to wait and see. The forecast that Paula has that housing included in it.
You know how many families are moving in and how many children are coming in?
We have to use the percentages that we use for everything else, which is to kind of even that out and work it out in terms of housing and migration. So what does that look like in other areas? What is it likely to be, dependent on the types of housing that are being built? What's likely in terms of the families that will move in? And as Paula said, it's not an exact science. Obviously, we can't say exactly who's going to move in, but we can have a rough guess based on lots of other criteria that we know about from other areas, and we use the DFE kind of guidance for that as well.
You know, most of these houses are 3 and 4 bedroomed houses. We can assume there are going to be teenagers moving in and they'll need high school places. You've got 50 places, 400 houses. I think it's quite clear those 50 places are going to be taken in the next couple of years. So is there a plan in place?
And if that is the case, we will absolutely keep reviewing that. And if we need to create new places, we need to create new places, and that's what we do.
I was just going to say, we obviously recognise the government have pushed on additional housing, so we are meeting with all our districts. We do have regular meetings with our housing planning officers, and we do obviously have an input into their local plans as well. So, you know, we are actively monitoring and making sure that we are aware of the housing and we are responding to it. Like I say, we have our methodology and that is applied at different stages. That methodology is tried and tested and is under review. So, you know, we do constantly come back and monitor. We're not looking, while we might not be acting on something now, it's because we don't need it yet, but it doesn't mean to say that we're not doing it in the background. So there's lots of work that gets done that you know, just because we don't highlight that there is a need at this point in time, there is work where it's constantly being monitored.
Does that mean that you'll be extending the schools that are already oversubscribed?
We'll be looking at a number of solutions, and that might be, you know, it could be an expansion, it could be a new school. It depends on what the need is.
Could I ask a quick question? Just bringing it back to the question one regarding South Chorley. Rivington and Blight Road High School, I went to see the head teacher last year, and they've actually had to reduce their PAN, which is a pupil admission number, yeah, you know better. They've actually had to reduce their PAN because of their reduced admissions from pupils within the Bolton district, but they are actually the closest secondary school to a large swathe of Adlington. More and more families are now looking at them from the Adlington, Anderton, Heath, Charnock, Rivington, South East Chorley area, because obviously they can't get into Albany and they might not necessarily want to go to Southland. So I just wonder, talking about the future and, you know, and what places may be available. There are places there now, and I know administratively they are in Bolton. Geographically they are in Chorley. I just wonder what the county council's doing to kind of encourage more sort of schools to work closer with them, because they are on a bus route. I mean, the head teacher and the chair of governors said we would up our pan like that if we were asked to, if we knew that we'd have the people coming down the road.
So when we knew that from Bolton, because obviously we did know that a couple of years ago, we did put in objection and actually asked not to do that because we knew there would be pressure on places. So at the time, that wasn't taken account of, but obviously we're always trying to work with our colleagues in other local authorities as well. And obviously if that's a solution that we need to have a look at, then we can do as well. But at the time when they said they were going to change it, they didn't consult LCC about it at the time, and we did make an objection. But we absolutely can go back and revisit that if we feel that that pressure is there in that particular area.
Thank you. Julia?
Can I just touch on SEND? And,
We're just
there's a
just dealing with question one, and then
sorry.
we'll go to two, which is slightly around SEND. So
Okay.
if you could pick that up in the
Thank you.
follow-ups on that, that'd be it. Is
Cheers.
there anything else on question one? No, fab. We'll go to question two. Thank you.
Okay, so question 2 talks about inadequate special educational needs funding, which isn't really to do with pupil places, but I will just spin it a little bit and talk about SEND places because I think that's probably useful anyway. So you may or may not be aware, so obviously Mayfield Special School, which is in Chorley, we've increased this year. They've had an expansion. It took up a little bit longer than we would like it to because of the groundworks that were involved, but it has been expanded by 20 places this year. And there is a potential phase 3 that we're obviously looking at as well if we still have that pressure on places. So that's a really positive move. It is a 2 to 19 provision, and it is a GLD school, which is a generic learning difficulty school as well. So that does mean that it does cover a wide range of special educational needs, and it is outstanding. So that's the one that's happening at the moment. The other ones, Astley Park, unfortunately, we're really struggling to expand that in any way because of the site that they're currently on. So as much as we would love to, it is really difficult within the space of that site to be able to have a look at that. But we hope that obviously as Mayfield does have that higher age range as well, it's potentially that might be useful for that too. We're also going to have our first SEND unit in Chorley. We have had Highfield obviously for a few years, but we've got a new one coming on board at St Joseph's in Chorley, just around the corner. And basically that will be, so just to define a SEND unit for you, I don't like the term SEND unit either. It's something that the DFE use because it suggests they're off and away, which absolutely isn't what a SEND unit is at all. So a SEND unit basically means that children who are able to access some of the mainstream provision, but obviously have some special educational needs where they might require smaller classwork and some specialist teacher input. So we would expect them basically to be within the kind of specialist teaching environment for about 50% of the time, and the other 50% into the mainstream. So they might take other classes with their peers, they might still do kind of obviously lunchtime, playtime, things like that. It might not be that they can access 50% of that right when they start. It might mean that that will be incremental over time. But it's basically for those children who are in the middle of specialist provision and mainstream provision who need that extra support. So we're really keen to try and expand SEND units across Lancashire. And we've obviously asked schools initially for expressions of interest, which is where we come to with St Joseph's. So we're really, really pleased that that's going to happen in St Joseph's. In terms of our secondary sector, and I know again we're edging into South Ribble, but we are going to have Northbrook as a SEND unit, and we're going to have Wellfield as a SEND unit at secondary as well. So those have basically been kind of suggested this week. They obviously still need to go through a whole consultation period, and obviously, but it's just to kind of make you aware that those are potentially things we're exploring at the moment. In terms of kind of funding, I probably think that's a different question, but just to sort of say that obviously we have high needs funding, which is given to the County Council from the Department for Education, and we basically assign that out as best we can and as consistently as we can across our schools. So obviously in terms of that high needs block, we can only give out what we have And so it is that sort of question around what that looks like. We are trying to make that as consistent as possible. We use something called banding to do that, and that is to try and make it fair and equitable across the system as to how much money we provide for different types of special needs across the system. But if you want to talk more about that to the councillor who obviously has asked that question, please just get in touch with me. I'm looking after inclusion at the moment as well, but there will be a new head of inclusion starting in 2 weeks' time, and then we'll go back to just doing one job. Basically, but if you do want to talk to me a bit further about send funding, I'm happy to talk to you about that, because there's a lot of work going on. We have got a banding working group at the moment as well who are looking at that and whether there's anything we can do around that to kind of utilise our high needs block a little bit better that might benefit schools and children.
Fab, thank you for that. Aaron, yeah, got a question to follow up?
Thank you, Jay. You touched on about relocation of Astley Special School.
Not relocation, just that we're struggling to expand on their current site. Yeah.
Expanding it. Could it be relocated? Could it have been relocated? Because I take children to that school, and it's an absolute nightmare for the residents. I'm glad I don't live on that road.
So in terms of relocation, it would be around the funding for that school, because it would be around £35 million to create a new special school. And so it really is kind of where that funding would come from. And obviously, actually the £35 million, we could probably create a lot more spaces and extensions to our other schools, which is obviously what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on question 2? No? Fab. Go on to question 3.
So I think we've answered question 3, but if anybody else would like to raise anything in particular, I think the question around particular faith groups, again, it is up to the school around their admissions authority and how they decide and where they put their faith groups and which churches they decide to come, use their criteria for. So again, I think I've answered that one, but if anybody else wants any questions on that one.
Ian's nodding. Any other questions on question 3, Alistair?
Could I just pick up on a slightly related issue? We focus a lot on secondary education because that's where the pinch points have been, but we've also got a bit of a bulge coming through some primary schools in certain areas, and Bookshaw's a classic example. I think there are 3, if not 4 entry forms there, aren't they? It's ridiculous how many people are at that school. Are there future peaks and troughs allowed there? Because a lot of schools have expanded, haven't they, over recent years, and they've gone through that bulge and that thing. Is there any work being done about reassessing the need on that? Because I suspect that the bulges will come in the north of the area around Clayton, because that's where you've had the most development, particularly Clayton Woods. And therefore, while they can decant over the board into South Ribble, because they are the closest to South Ribble, I'm also conscious that the South Ribble schools on the other side of the motorway are also pretty full from what I hear, and there's a lot of development going on in that area of South Ribble as well, i.e. around at Farrington and that.
Yes. So obviously all the primaries absolutely are under the same formula that we talked about around constantly re-evaluating what we know from the planning areas, what we know about housing, what we know about migration, how that all feeds into those numbers. In terms of the primary sector, actually the concern at the moment is the falling roles for those schools, and we know that some in Chorley are already struggling with that in terms of their reception. Bookshaw wasn't full for the first time this year. So actually it is probably a little bit of both of those. So when that new housing comes on, actually they already have space because they've got the falling birth rate at the moment for some of those schools.
Lovely. Any more for any more? Or we'll let the officers and Jane go on for a well and brew. Oh, Aaron has to put his hand up.
Just one on special education. Once a young adult leaves school, the government has said for a couple of years ago that they are to be in education until 21 or apprenticeship. 25, thank you. I know of people that are being failed, that they left school and 2 years later haven't been able to be placed into college, to the point that once you start getting towards 25, would they be stopped from doing because it wouldn't be finished?
So they have an EHCP, so an education, health and care plan until they're 25 if they want to do that. And basically the county council can do that. However, that education, health and care plan is for them to make progress into education and employment and training. So basically that's reviewed with the family and the child. It should be every year. And basically within that, we could then decide with them together whether that plan needs to cease or not. So for example, if they're functioning as an adult, they've got a job and they're 23, then they probably don't need an educational healthcare plan anymore. However, if they have very complex needs and they require that continued work in order to make progress, then they will continue on that educational health and care plan. In terms of finding them appropriate places and spaces, we've got a supported internship programme that we've been working really hard on at the moment to make sure we increase more places. We're aware that colleges, it's really difficult at the moment because the college funding system has changed a little bit, which means that they don't get as much funding for those lower end sort of qualifications, so level 1 and level 2, which means that therefore there is less out there to be able to for some of our children with special needs to be able to apply for. But basically they have that funding and that EHCP available to them, and it's just about trying to find them places to do that. I'm aware that we are going to struggle to place all of those children who want to place those, but that's what we're trying to find, is as many places and things that we can do that would really help them to make progress.
There's one young person I'm thinking of, which lives about 150 yards that way. He just got failed from when he left school on Friday for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yet his mother kept going on to county council, no reply, not so much reply, no resolution. Now he said there are some places, well, I would always say that any placing sixth form is better than none.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that still wasn't there. And I know we're talking about one particular case, that I'm talking about one person, but it's not happening in isolation. You can't do.
No, I agree, and I think we would absolutely work with our colleges to try and improve their offer and to have more places available, which is what we're trying to do. But again, the colleges don't necessarily sit with the LCC either, so it is that case of, we would really like you to, it would be really helpful if, please could you do this, how can we support you to try and do this, rather than us being able to mandate that they increase their places or put particular courses on.
But if the government is saying, you as a young person will be in, who's to say that they can't be in?
There's no one to say that they can't be in, it's just trying to find them what's appropriate.
Because he wasn't in.
If it's about in a particular case that you'd like me to pick up, then please just pop me an email, it's no problem, I'll pick it up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, we'll do Lynn and Juliet, and then that's it. So we'll bring it to a close, and then we're done. Thank you.
I'm very familiar with what it's like for children and young adults in SEND in education, because my stepson, Oliver Moores, has gone through education. It was difficult in primary school. It's extremely difficult at college. It's much more improved in university. And though he did have a place at Runshaw College, I feel they failed him in many ways, and that needs improving drastically. To say to a young man that he can't go to any lessons upstairs, even if there is a lift, just in case there's a fire, for instance. These crazy rules are in place that needs addressing. There was just so much over the 3 years he spent there that made it difficult. I'm shocked that he actually made it through Runshaw, but he did. And he got to university, and he's done his Masters, and he's doing his PhD. But I think colleges need to do an awful lot more. Aaron is right to make it easier for our young adults, they're not children anymore, to progress in education, because there should be more people like my son who are going to university, because they are very capable. Their disabilities can sometimes just be physical, and there's you know what I mean, they've got so much more to offer.
Absolutely, completely
we should
agree
be doing
with you.
so much more for them in colleges.
Completely do,
need to see an
I would
improvement.
hope in this circumstance that's it's illegal, because it's not a reasonable adjustment. So that would be where our stance would be on that. So we'd be able to do something like that if there was a similar case at the moment.
Last question from Julia.
It's just really staying with young adults, really, whether or not we've got the scope to do some joint work with about independent living for young adults that are supported in education when they have SEND. A bit much like we're doing with as corporate parents with the children in care. That it really is critical, to get good education, to have somewhere where they want, where they want to feel like it's home, and not necessarily being reliant on the parents all the time, because they're young adults and they want aspirations just like any other young person.
Absolutely, and that's what the work of the SEND partnership is about. It's obviously trying to pull together everybody, whether that's adult social care or kind of whoever else needs to be around the room in order to have those discussions.
Lovely. Well, I think that's been a really useful discussion, hasn't it? if anything does crop up or anybody has any questions, I think Jane's email will make sure it's on the minutes and everything. If there's anything, conscious there's probably one or two parishes that aren't here tonight as well with the bad weather and that as well. So, and if people,
you'll probably think of another question on the way home. I always do. I think, well, should have asked that. So just drop me a line if that's the case.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, well, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it, and you're more than welcome to stay, or we won't take offence if you want to go home and have your tea. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. All right, we'll go on to item 4, if we're all okay for that. Thanks very much. Thank you. See you. Oh, brilliant, thank you. Item 4, sports and leisure provision. So this was requested by Wealdstone Parish Council. So Jennifer Mullin, to my left, is going to provide us with an update on some of the questions and points that have been raised.
Right, so there was a long list of questions. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to provide an overview. If you want any more details, I'm quite happy to send a report after this meeting, or I can get some of the officers to come down and talk about the different schemes that we've got, if any of them are particularly interesting for you. So the first question was about leisure facilities, sports and leisure facilities in Chorley and the urban core. So we have got many leisure facilities, our own leisure facilities, our own leisure centres. We've also got football pitches. We have also support the youth zone. So there's quite a number of facilities that we've got. I think one of the important things that we do as a council is that we do regular updates and analysis of our leisure facilities throughout the district. So there is a playing pitch strategy that we have, an open space sports and recreational strategy. So on a regular basis that we will review all our facilities, the quality, the amount of them, the need in the areas. So that would give us an indication of where we need to invest the money that we do have through our Section 106s, but also the money that we have ourselves. And that will lead us into delivering local projects that we've got on. So at the moment, the local projects that we are doing, just to give you an update on things that we're doing at the moment. So there's quite a few schemes that are already ongoing. So we've got schemes at Gillett Playing Fields, Jubilee Playing Fields, King George V Playing Fields, Jim Fowler's Exton Villas. We've also got the Westway Fitness Loop that we're developing at the moment. We've done schemes at Westway, we've done schemes at Wigan Lane and the Chorley Bowman. So we are always investing in our leisure and sports facilities, and that is led from the intelligence that are provided from yourselves as a parish council, our sports and local clubs, as well as work that the officers are doing. So that leads us to looking at how we can invest and moving forward. So that's about our facilities. There was a question about outreach work as well and what outreach work we do. The council don't have a sports development team, but what we do have is a community team. And that community team leads on quite a number of outreach facilities. The biggest one really being the holiday and activity and food fund that we have. So we have outreach activities in most of the main school holidays, summer, Easter and Christmas, and activities are provided throughout the Chorley district, providing facilities for kids on free school meals. There is also a percentage, 15% of kids who aren't on free school meals can access these facilities. So this summer there was over 1,000 kids access the summer facilities. This can range from activities such as swimming, cricket, tennis, all range of dance facilities that we've got throughout the district, based in schools, in leisure centres, in community buildings. That's run by, some of it's run by the youth zone, some of it's run by community provision, and there's activities that we look at diversionary activities. There's also diversionary activities that youth zone lead, both in the youth zone itself, but also outside the youth zone in different areas of diversion. That is generally led by antisocial behaviour reports that we're getting. So if there is reports in particular areas, we'll ask the youth zone to grow in those particular areas and offer some diversionary activities. In addition to that, our own community safety team lead on diversionary activities. They've had some funds from the Police and Crime Commissioner to do activities in particular areas, again led by antisocial behaviour reports. So we've done activities on Westway, Devonshire Rec. So there is quite a lot of outreach activities in the area. Again, we can always do more, so we're again happy to take some suggestions. There was also a question on health-related activities that are offered by ourselves and local sports clubs. Again, there is quite a lot of different health activities that we're doing ourselves. We've got a healthy weights programme we're working on, and that provides people who have concerns about the weight, they can come, and it's an 8-week session that we hold in various community centres and leisure centres throughout the district. We also are working on a project for cancer rehab and prehab in our leisure centres as well. And I'm sure there's other things that parish councils are doing and local sports clubs. We're working with some of the football clubs for men and men's mental health. So we're funding some men's mental health work with the sports, some of the sports clubs. So there's quite a bit of activity. And then there's a question about future plans for the council. I think we're in a good period at the moment because the local plan is ongoing. So part of that local plan, again, is for us to study our sports and leisure provision. So we've got some consultants who are going to look at our open space sports and recreational strategy. So again, they are going to be talking to yourselves, other clubs, to see what are the gaps. So what are the gaps in our area? Is it we've not got enough provision for hockey? Is it that we haven't got enough provision for football and 3G pitches? So that is going to be ongoing at the moment. I think they've just been commissioned. So they're going to look at the facilities that we've got. Our parks, play areas are also included in that to see whether we need some further investment. And I know that at the moment there's quite a number of schemes that we're hopefully going to go forward with. So thinking about Bookshaw, we've got a replacement for the AGP hockey pitches that we're discussing, Westway Fitness Loop. So that again, there's quite a number of schemes that are coming, but I think where you can engage as a parish council is to really give us some feedback on the facilities that are in the district and where we see that the gaps are. So I think another question was a discussion question. Is anything else being offered by the parish councils? And that's over to yourselves really on leisure and physical activities. So again, I'm quite happy to answer any questions. And again, any particular detail you want on the local plan, we can bring somebody down to discuss that, or on the diversion activities. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Scott? Oh, we'll do Terry first, because it's Terry's question, and then I'll come to Aaron and Alan if that's all right. So Terry first. I've got Alan on my list.
What provision is being made for giving grants for outdoor gyms for adults? So play equipment. In London, in many parks, they have this equipment and they are fully used.
Yeah, that will be part of the Parks and Open Space strategy that we're going to be discussing. So that funding that comes via 106, what we're hoping to see is to come out of that is recommendations that people have made and what the gaps are. So I suppose when I spoke to the planners, they were saying it's like a shopping list. So again, we'll be coming up with a shopping list of funding that we need and a shopping list of activities, and that if that comes out quite strongly from this strategy, then that will hopefully go on the shopping list.
And with the strategy that you're talking about, is there provision going to be made for the outreach parishes? Because we have less facilities than most in our areas, different areas.
Could I just clarify a point that Jennifer made? There is no budget coming to us for outdoor gyms. So So there is no money for outdoor gyms per se. What you would come from is SIL money or Section 106 money from development. That's where this money would come from. So when they do a housing development, if it's over a certain size, they give a certain amount of money that the planning conditions to pay us either Section 106 or SIL money. It's a bit confused because there's two systems running at the same time, but anyway, get around that. What you then have to do is identify who's going to apply for that money. So the parish head would have to ask for that money and get it onto what they call the SIL list. And then there's an identified requirement or need for that provision in that area, and it's evidence-based. So the evidence that Jennifer's talking about would be they do an assessment of how many football pitches there are in that area. If there's a shortage of football pitches, then you might look to put football pitches in that area. But another area might have too many football pitches, and that's the study that's already been done, as Jennifer said, but it's being refreshed, I think, as part of the local plan, isn't it? Yeah. And it's interesting because Alan's area in Eccleston, I've been asked by the Eccleston Cricket Club about the development that's going on in Eccleston at the moment. Is there Section 106 coming out of that for sports pitches? Because the cricket club's looking for new nets. So I don't doubt Alan's going to ask that question now. But, you know, it's the same thing. But they needed evidence of what they want to do, so there's got to be something they want to do, and then it's also got to be on the perceived shortage. And the question I have, Jennifer, a little bit on the back of that is can that money go to private clubs, or does it have to go to council facilities?
No, it can go to private clubs if there is a need in the strategy. So after the analysis, if, for example, there is a need for additional football pitches, then it can go to a private club, yeah.
And therefore, the plea for councils is to get your schemes that you're aware of onto that list, because they're not on the list, they're not up for the investment. So if you want an outdoor gym in Brinscull, for argument's sake, or Wealton, you'd have to have done the studies, said what they need to do, and then get it on that list. Because when the money becomes available, you want it on the list to be able to be funded.
I'll go to the next person. Is that all right, Terry?
Well, the second question, please,
Yeah.
if I may. When the youth zone was set up, there was supposed to be transport provision for the outreach villages. That seems to have gone by the by. But clearly, antisocial behaviour takes place in the villages, the outlying villages. So what provision do you think they can be made to transport young people into the youth zone?
Do you want to give a political answer, Terry? I'll let Jennifer give but politically, the problem we had, and I'm happy to say this because one of the former Conservative leaders, Martin Boardman, raised this at Maudsley, saying that the kids didn't want to use the transport to come into the youth zone. So the idea was that we transport them in. And we put that provision on, and ultimately, for whatever reason, and to quote Martin Boardman, his kids were too busy every night of the week. They had something else on, and they didn't have time to go to the youth zone. So we can do outreach provision, and Jennifer's mentioned that, with the youth zone, and they have a fund to do that, but they have to be given a reason to go somewhere. So for the moment, I'm obviously representing Heath Charnock. In Heath Charnock, there is a youth club effectively run between Heath Charnock, Adlington and Anderson, I think, and I think certainly two of the parish councils, if not all of them, town councils, are putting money into that, alongside the youth zone, alongside Chorley Council, to make that work. So there has to be an evidence-based to need that intervention, as Jennifer's pointed out. So if there is antisocial behaviour going on, or kids hanging out with nothing to do, tell us who, how, what, and we'll come up with a scheme that works for those young people, probably by talking to them, saying, what is it you want to do? Not just going and doing something that they don't want to do. Because when we put the minibuses on previously, they didn't want to go into the youth zone in Chorley. Some did, some didn't, but generally there wasn't the take-up. So we've tried different things in different areas, and therefore there's no one-size-fits-all. It's got to be something that works. So very popular at the moment is the one at Westway, isn't it, I think, around the Preston North End scheme at Westway, which is a sports-based scheme administered by Preston North End, and they bring the players down and all that sometimes to make it a bit more interesting. And that's bringing, as I understand it, lots of people from lots of different villages into that central point. And I think mainly a lot of police commissioner money's going in there, we're putting money in. There's lots of things going on, so we take the kids to where the activity is, rather than just taking them to a place where they may not want to be.
And finally, do you think it's a good idea that parishes provide you with a list of activities and facilities they have, and that can be circulated to all of us?
That'd be very useful, yes.
Thank you.
So, and I do know, Terry, from the Adlington Youth Club offer that I think Inspire have just appointed somebody specifically to oversee the outreach offer because they're trying to make sure that they're dealing with the needs of the entire outreach area of the borough. Village is inclusive, so I know I've forgotten the lady's name, but she is specifically overseeing sort of the detached outreach work, so hopefully.
I mean, again, just to emphasise the point, this is going to be led by the numbers of issues that we've got. So again, it's really difficult. We can't spread it so thinly. But where we have got issues, particularly antisocial behaviour, and people are saying we do need outreach work in a particular area, then we will ask the youth zone and they'll put some services on. But it is difficult when we did have those buses. Parents didn't really want the kids going on it either for safety reasons. So I think getting something out there to address a particular problem is the way to go, really.
Brilliant. So we've got Aaron, you next on the list.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask a question about the newly polished Julian Chorley's crown, Brinscoe Baths. After spending £600,000, if not more, and committed to ensuring that access to quality and affordable facilities, and the team's worked hard tirelessly on its restoration, it's not open at weekends. My understanding, and I'd love to be corrected, that there's not an issue with staffing it, there's not an issue with the money. The pool is heated over the weekend anyway, and yet it's not open and not bringing any income. Is it correct that the website says it's closed on Saturday and Sunday?
So at the moment it is closed on Saturday and Sunday. So what we're doing is we're taking a phased approach with the work at Brinscoe. So we are looking at introducing different times, we're trialling different times and phasing the opening. I think what we do need to understand is that having a swimming pool is very costly, staffing it is extremely costly. So what we do need to do is understand where the need is, and that's why we're doing it as a phased approach. So I was talking to Councillor Murray yesterday about that, to look at the next phase in January, looking at some additional opening hours for swimming early mornings, for some lane swimming. Again, we've had some requests for that. So again, it's very much on a phased approach and a trial and pilot to see what works at Brinscoe.
Thank you. Aaron, that was in your cabinet papers about a month ago. So this plan to do the phased opening and try different things was in the cabinet papers. So it was briefed. I know Matt Lynch asked a question similarly, and I said to him, he should have read his papers. It was there. We're going to try different things because what's happened in the past at Brinscoe is it's been kept open with a lot of staff for 3 or 4 people swimming. So what we're trying to do is condense the times that people swim, so you have more of them there at a time, and that then opens it for other functions, whether that's swimming lessons or clubs or whatever it might be at different times, so that we can actually make it sustainable, because unfortunately under its previous opening regime it was only going to close because it would have just kept losing money. So we've revamped it, we spent the money on it, but we need to make it come into some kind of viable situation. That doesn't mean making a profit, that just means not costing a fortune. And everybody's aware, I don't know if everybody's aware in the room, but Chorley Council, like every other council in Lancashire, is facing a budget deficit next year of over £1 million. And a lot of, you just see West Lancs closing there, all their swimming pools. So trust me, swimming pools are the one that most councils are looking at. I know Rossendale, Pendle have been closing their pools. Most pools are under review. We are one of the few councils actually just invested in reopening a pool. But therefore the cost, particularly energy costs, are horrendous. And staffing then is a secondary cost, which again, what you want is your staff there, not just, and in the past, the staff at Brinscoe, unfortunately, and we've had issues before with not enough to do. So we need to compress the times, and that's why we're trying different things with different people.
If I could just say that I think Chorley should be commended for not just Brinscoe Baths. There are lots of things that Chorley's doing which others aren't. So,
We've got Alan waiting patiently.
Thanks, Chair. I don't want to rain on the parade. But for my sins, I am the rural champion. And what the officer referred to was some wonderful capital schemes which were all based, perhaps inevitably, amongst the central urban area. And what I would like to ask is at some stage in the future, because the urban core represents about 30% of the borough. When capital schemes go on, housing schemes go on, parish councils get 15% of CIL money, borough councils get 85%, and Section 106 money that Alistair alludes to. So I'd just like to plant the seed that at some stage, when some of these capital schemes are being considered, and I understand the necessity for the infrastructure and the willingness of the areas to have them, etc. I'd just like to suggest that perhaps a little bit more thought goes into the location of some of these larger capital schemes, rather than leaving it to parish councils. Reference was made to the youth facility, I understand that, and we tried, I think, to get some people to bus some of the kids in from the rural areas, Croston and Maudsley and Eccleston and so on. Didn't work. At least I don't think it worked anyway. So it's just to lodge that request, Chair. I'm conscious that I'm not going to offend Lord Bradley.
I'll never stop you before,
I never, but I think it just needs to be said that some of the rural areas do need some larger scale capital investment. I understand reluctance of resources and so on and so forth. Thanks, Chair. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, noted. And I think this is why the strategy is so very important, and that we get feedback from everybody on the strategy to use the Section 106 and so receipts that we've got in the areas. And that's why it's really important that we look at analysis of what the need is in those particular areas, and that, as I say, the shopping list that I've mentioned, that we can look at what's the need, look at the quality and quantity in a particular area, and then focus on projects that really have come out of this analysis, which will include a consultation with yourselves and sports clubs and youth facilities.
Fab, thank you, Ellen. Michelle?
Thanks, Chair. Apologies for the groggy voice. No comments from over there. You mentioned about the Liaison doing some divisionary work. I've got a massive problem with the ASB in my ward, massive, to the point where stagecoach are stopping coaches going through the ward. And that is a key route for a lot of my elderly residents and people with disabilities accessing healthcare facilities. So I'd like to know exactly what it is that the Liaison are doing, because as far as I can see in my ward, nothing's happening. And I'm getting daily reports and emails of staff in the local shops being abused to the point where they're shutting up shop. I've got the bus route stopping because of this behaviour. You know, simple things like kids are lying in the road and a bus driver's slamming on not to hit the kids, and then they're getting bricked and egged and everything else, and it's not good enough. So I'm keen for the ASB, and I know we've got a meeting coming up around this issue, because it's not just around the brook, it's over at the community centre at Clayton Green that there's increasing antisocial behaviour. They've got little, and I want this stopping, and I want it stopping now before a kid is seriously hurt or worse, killed, and they're locked up. And I don't want that. I don't think anybody in this room wants that. So I do think what Alan said, a lot of these schemes are centric. The outer, my region, my area seems to be forgotten about, and I know Coppell's probably the same. We've got to stop looking at the centre of Chorley being the key area. It's not. I've got a semi-rural ward, and there are massive, massive ASB issues. And I'd be interested on a breakdown, as you said at the start of your input, about the report. I would like a more detailed one, if that's possible.
I think, Alec, do you want to answer that one?
Well, this idea about a centric urban area, I don't see Brinskull or Adlington, as referred to before, considering themselves part of the Chorley urban core,
Or
East Jarnock, or Exton, etc., etc., etc. The money will come from the development sites in the area. There's plenty of development sites up in Claytonley Woods and Claytonley Woods and Whitley Woods. So there's money there to do it. I think most of it's been grabbed and taken to the western part of the area. So you need to get in there and fight for your case, and also get these things on the list. So I'm not aware of any schemes in Clayton Brook or Clayton East that are on the list. I'm aware of lots in Clayton West. So you need to get these schemes promoted yourselves. The same with Allen, and Allen should get it in a cricket field because it's right opposite the development that's taking place. If they're saying they need money for something, that will link to that site very easily. The same in Claytonley Woods. So there are schemes that have been developed up there. Get a grab on that money. But if you don't get those schemes in the list, they won't be considered. And the evidence will come from the police. Now the problem with the antisocial behaviour is mainly, as you well know, Michelle, about a lack of police up there, and we've raised that with the police. That's not so much around diversionary activity. There is diversionary activity up there, and so much so that the police meeting tonight was cancelled because no police turned up at it, and that's tonight's meeting at Clayton Green. So there are issues in all the areas, but let's not maintain this myth about we are more than happy to spend money as a council away from the urban core, but it tends to follow development. A lot of that money, and Eddie Riggins on the call, so I'll mention it, is coming out of Buckshore. So it has to be linked in some cases to Buckshore or where that development's taking place. But places like Clayton, Adlington, Coppell are having development, as we heard before. So therefore there will be money linked quite close, Anacosson, to those areas. So make those linkages back to your community requirements in those areas. All right, and we're happy to do that. So any parish council wants to put money in or put a scheme forward, we're more than happy to piggyback on that. The problem, the places I feel sorry for are the likes of Bretherton and that, where they always complain they never get any development, which is most places that people would be happy about, then they never get any of the money that comes out of those developments. But what we've got to try and do is keep as much of the benefit locally to those areas which have the development.
And Jennifer will come back to you on your other point as well. Julia and then Lynn.
Yeah, we were fortunate to meet Lisa Holmes from Inspire yesterday to try and scope out some activity, and she shared with us the experience at Adlington. And I've always had this thing about, I know the Councillor Bradley at one time promised us bespoke transport to enable parish children to come into town. We haven't quite got there yet, but at the same time, what has come out of the Adlington exercise is that children have gained in confidence by making new friendships, and those activities in Adlington now mean that they've got the confidence to go on the bus. And that can be expanded because it's not. We just need to tap into stuff like that. But the difficulty we've got in Coppell, when we've been very busy with the neighbourhood plan, is that we've identified a lot of our open space, our recreation space, is just boggy. And we're literally different ownerships, the diocese, whether it's parish council, whether it's the football club, everyone's got problems with drainage. And in some ways, and the other thing, when you go to the buildings, we've got lots of assets that are great because you want to be outdoors as much as you can, but in the winter months, we want to be able to use those assets again for sports and recreation. And it's really, really, really important that people carry on socialising. So we have these issues, and I'm sure they're common in other parishes too, and it'd be really good if we did some work, perhaps with Bernie Hegarty's team around identifying funding for things around, think big, but we've got to be able to get these assets improved so that they're fit for a purpose, but potential's there. There are plenty of eager people with expertise or volunteers or whatever that want to put something back into these communities, and but we have to deal with the limitations of what we've got. And I don't know whether there is anything out there about whether we did joint work around drainage, particularly when we've got all these developers coming into the villages, tapping into what they've got, whether it's equipment or opportunity. But I'm quite positive, and we have to be quite positive, but with sharing information about the issues might be half the way to solving them, because a bigger remit around drainage, or even potentially about a new sport or an existing sport that needs investment, we might need to collaborate.
Really good point. I think definitely noted. Do you want to come back on
Yeah,
that?
just just on that about clustering, parish councils clustering together, we don't want to try and do everything in every parish. It's not realistic, it's not feasible. So the more we can do as a cluster of parishes, and to be fair, that's, you know, I'll go to East Janet Parish Council meetings, they drag on far too long, but they are quite useful because what you hear there is what they're doing together. So Anderton, Adlington and East Janet do quite a lot of stuff together. So they're rotating spids, for example. So they're having a spid between the three parish councils and they rotate it between the various areas. It saves them the cost of doing it all themselves. So there's lots of co-working that they're doing together. They're doing a joint objection on the thing to the planning application, aren't they, on the anaerobic digester thing along with Coppell and others. So there's lots of stuff that they're doing together. And I think that's the way we can make the money go further, is if we, rather than doing a pitch in every area, Julia, going back to your point, if you just improve the drainage in that one there, it would serve 2 or 3 villages better than, back to Alan's point, it's not being done right in the centre in Astley Park or wherever it might be on a big central playing field, but we can do it in one village, but we can't do it in 3 or 4 villages. So I think we do it in clusters if we can. And that means parish councils working together, and you've got the eastern ones, you've got Brinscoll, Wealton, Withnell parish councils. The more we can do together, it's easier because it shares the risk and it also allows us to agglomerate some of the money.
Good point. Certainly works well up our end, doesn't it? Lynn, and then I think we'll call it a day then on this discussion. Thanks.
Some of the things I was going to raise have already been covered briefly, and I agree with Michelle. You know, the antisocial behaviour and getting the likes of Inspire out to the villages is a massive issue in Coppell as well. We're hoping somewhere, I'm hoping somewhere down the line we can get the kids into Inspire, because we have an issue with the buses as well. We don't have stagecoach. It just costs too much. Julia touched on drainage. We do have a football pitch in Coppell that is parish council owned. It does need draining. The local football club have asked if they can use it, and I'm hoping they could do more with the kids in the area. How's that funded? It's a really good question. Is it something we could apply for, and is it something we'll get? And focusing on the latter part.
I think without going back over it, I think as Alistair said, make the case with Julia, Ryan and Alex, because, you know, and put the case forward. And
Aaron mentioned about Brinscoll Pool. I'm fully aware, I think everybody's fully aware they're about to revitalise Chorley, and that's going to take some time, and I imagine closures at Chorley while they do it. Will Brinscoll be open on the weekends while that happens? Because I'm one of these people who pulled away from having a membership at Chorley because I was fed up of having nowhere to swim. They're actually about to do it up, and then it's going to be completely closed. I'd like to know I've got somewhere else to go.
Do you mean the all seasons refurbishment? Oh, that won't affect the pool at the moment. So that is the gym area and the dry side changing rooms. There is further phases for the wet side changing rooms and potentially the introduction of a slide. But at the moment, we've not got any plans to close the pool.
And during half term for adults, where do they swim when the pool is closed for children?
Well, hopefully we'll have Brinscoll as well. So one of the it's a phased approach. So we're opening up for lane swimming during the half-term holidays at Brinscoll. We're looking at introducing more lane swimming. Again, it is going to be a phased approach, as we've discussed.
Thank you.
Fab. Any other comments? We'll call it a day on that one. Thank you, Jennifer and Alistair. Right, item 5, questions from members of Liaison and the public. Any questions from anybody? No. Going once, going twice. No. That's it. Fab. Then we'll go on to item 6, items for future meetings. So I think that's on the back of the agenda. So future meeting dates are included in the agenda. We've got a couple of topics that people have previously suggested. So police and antisocial behaviour. The police have said they'll come. New inspector, I don't know, is
James Neal.
James Neal. So we're hoping to get them for January, and I think we'll combine the police and antisocial behaviour item together. And then we've got town centre strategy post-COVID. We'll try and put that in at some point as well. Is there anything else anybody wants to suggest? But I know Ruth sends out an email just to try and remind people along the way as well. But I know she does get a bit disillusioned when she doesn't get many replies. So do think. Anything else? No, okay. Item 7, any urgent business previously agreed? There is no urgent business, so the next meeting is Wednesday the 22nd of January. So Happy New Year. Oh,
Of order, just on the other business while we're here. Just on, obviously, going into winter, we've had a winter fuel allowance cut, which we're getting obviously hear about, and I'm not going to make a political point about that, or anybody else making any political points about it. But we've had that. There are talk about other fuel increases going up in October as well. Obviously, we've seen the inflation come down today, but there is obviously a perception out there that, and we had this last winter as well, there is a massive warm spaces programme across Chorley, which Jennifer's heads up for us. So, and that's a lot of parish council input, it's a lot of borough council input, and basically anybody else who can input as well. So, housing associations, county council, there is a huge programme. I've asked Jennifer to share that information with councillors. I think we should share it with parish councils as well, so you all know what's happening, not just in your own parishes, but also in your neighbouring parishes. So there's a lot of help out there. There is also discretionary help for people who are in fuel hardship in Chorley that we ran last year, we're running this year. We're not advertising it massively because we may be massively oversubscribed, because we're not replacing everybody's £300 odd that who's just lost it. It's based on, if people are in real need though, and they're in that choice of don't heat or don't eat, or not putting the heating on, we don't want to see people suffering because they're not in support of, getting supported. We will help them as much as we can, as much as anybody can. I'm sure parishes are the same, I'm sure county are the same, etc. And I know the housing associations are the same as well. So if you come across anybody like that, there's help available, come to us, come to Jennifer's team, and come to the council. We can help. We can't change the world, and we can't reverse a £7 million cut in whatever it is on winter fuel allowance. But what we can do is help people in real hardship. So please be aware of that, and ask Jennifer if you can send something out to all the parish councils. It'd be really useful, just reiterating that point as well.
Jennifer, yeah.
Just to say that the council is looking for warm spaces. So if any of the parish councils have spaces that they're willing to, we'll add them on our list. So if you'd let me know, we can look at the warm spaces. There is some money available as well. So if there is anybody who has a warm space that they can provide for us, then
Or
in their community centres.
Parishes or churches or anybody else
anybody in the community with a space to provide, then we can look at that and add that onto our list.
We'll make sure that's circulated. Terry?
Just for a future meeting, please. Is it worthwhile considering Chorley's preparedness for climate change?
Yeah. Did we not have some? But it was a while ago. We had something from Sally Green, wasn't it? But it was a while ago. I'm sure we can have a look through the minutes and see what she did. And yeah.
I've been on the webinars at CES, Climate Change Emergency Society, and I think it would be useful for us to revisit.
Yeah.
It just stops football pitches flooding.
Good stuff, yeah, we'll make a note.
But in winter they become skating rinks.
We'll get that on at some point in the future. Fab, so we'll close that up. Thanks for coming. Meeting closed, thanks.